I came on a little bit earlier than expected, actually later than expected, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about this event almost 20 years ago. I don't really like talking about this too often. I've got it because it's been done so often. We've been hearing about Katrina every time the anniversary comes up. I got to keep talking about it around this date. But we're here. The world keeps spinning. And right or wrong, life goes on. So I say good evening to everyone. First off, good evening, good evening, good evening. If you're watching on Rumble, if you're watching on X, welcome to the channel. So I'm going to talk about this stupid ass storm named Katrina again and what we've been through. I am your host, the one and with the most, G Rich, aka Gvu2786. If you're watching via X, via Rumble, random topics, or ScrewTube, welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to this broadcast. Some of you, of course, may catch the live later. I want to talk about this tonight. Of course, there's a lot going on in the world, a lot of stuff that's been moving forward. They're even talking about, uh, of course, I'm hearing stuff about Travis Hunter having a baby with his wife, and uh, of course, Donald Trump uh, is still dominant in the news. We're hearing about stuff in Chicago with Brandon Johnson. I'm hearing things about that. Uh, Black women get fighting to get in the YMCA. Of course, I've been busy campaigning, all of this stuff. Elections coming up. That's preoccupied my time, but I wanted to talk and take this moment, I guess, to talk about Katrina and to talk about what I went through 20 years later. I've talked about this before. So I figured it'd be appropriate that I speak on this, that I speak about what happened with me and my family 20 years ago. I was a lucky one. My family and I, we had the chance to evacuate and go to Dallas, Texas, which we did that Saturday. No, that Sunday. Sorry. So actually, this date on the 28th was when we made it into Dallas, Texas, right around this time. And it took hours to get to Dallas, probably over 10 or 11 hours. And that was because, with contraflow, and that's the main thing I remember, the state's contraflow that was so bad the year prior to. You're stuck in traffic for, and I'm not kidding, in traffic that would normally take you 30 minutes to cross the Pontchartrain, to cross Pontchartrain, Lake Pontchartrain, or the Causeway Bridge, which usually take, I'm sorry, not the Causeway Bridge, or even the Bonnet Carrot. It was going to take you 3 hours because everybody was headed west. And what we did with Katrina, we headed actually north. We went on Bonnet, from what I remember, I believe we went I-55, if my memory serves me correctly. And lanes were open both way on both sides of the bridges. The lanes were only open in one direction. So instead of people coming into the city, you had to go out going straight north this way. And we ended up, of course, doing that. We went to Dallas. And I remember that was actually the night on the MTV Music Awards. My father had a pharmacy uh, right off Chef Highway. Not even 4 months old. We opened in April of 2005, and I remember my aunt coming to our house, coming to the pharmacy, It's talking about what are we gonna do for the storm? What are we gonna do? And it was a caravan, basically. My grandfather, my great auntie, my brother, my parents, of course, my aunt, all of us going to Dallas, and we were only gonna stay at the hotel for of what we expected was like 2 days at best, because it happened previously during hurricanes. The storm comes and then it stops, doesn't do anything, and that's what we expected, and sadly, I was mistaken. Now, coincidentally, I'm in Dallas, Texas. We're in Dallas, Texas, which is the place where all the conspiracy theories started here in the United States, the granddaddy of them all, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, right in Dallas, Texas. And I don't think I was staying that far uh, from Dealey Plaza. I don't think we were that far. So I didn't know too much about that. I wasn't too much into the Kennedy assassination. I got into it years actually like a year later because I started researching what really happened with Hurricane Katrina, the stuff about the levees and so forth. So getting back to Katrina though, that night, of course, I said the MTV Music Award. So the next day, we see the flooding on the streets, but it wasn't like the water. What I saw, especially on Poydras and Canal Street, it wasn't like this was 15 feet of water where everything was covered. It wasn't to that point that bad, but not until that Tuesday morning or going into late Monday when we saw the devastation was worse. It's really Tuesday when we actually just saw the floodgates opening up, especially by the 17th Street Canal. Water just pouring in and in, like you opened up. It's like you're flowing water into a bowl. Like you open up a faucet and you see, and water's just rushing in and overflowing. That's just how it was. The floodgate was literally open, and sorry, I couldn't believe what I was seeing and the stuff we were hearing, and the things that many people, blacks, the people that were left behind, who were mostly black, were experiencing. They had people that had now. Years later, as you know, or during that time, everybody knows I would start researching about Hurricane Katrina and the stories and interviewing several people that were there, from the late great Dick Gregory, who actually I interviewed for my book. I have to put his interview up on YouTube. I'll do that. I keep telling myself to do it, and I haven't had a chance to, but I believe I should do that soon for everybody. Dick Gregory. I interviewed Clotilde Mack, a elderly 90-something-year-old woman who was stuck in the attic of her home on Cluett Street in the night ward. I also had, she was stuck for almost 10 days. Also, talking to Mama D. There's a bunch of people I interviewed. There's a bunch in my book. And what happened, people, of course, one fat person I interviewed who saw the barge pass through the levee system. And then you had, although, Dick Gregory told me that was probably planted. Interesting enough with that barge that was there, and I think I've put, uh, they even determined in the courts that it wasn't the barge that broke. They said that that wasn't the barge, but this was the barge. ING, that just, and that it still sat there. And y'all know when there was another hurricane, Hurricane Gustav in 2008 that came. There was a barge parked right by the levee again. I saw this with my own eyes. It was on TV. That was in 2008. Yeah, I'm tired of this. So I remember that, and yeah, I'm gonna see if I can find it. But that was interesting. So yeah, there was another barge. Right. There was another barge by the Lord Line. I distinctly remember that. Is that it? Yeah, look. And Baton Rouge was the one that got hit by uh Baton Rouge was actually hit directly by Gustav. And Gustav went to the right side of us. It didn't hit New Orleans directly. Hurricane Ida hit New Orleans directly, which was actually the anniversary of Ida is tomorrow. It's the same as Katrina. And Ida knocked down the antenna, the electricity grid here. Yeah, Ida was something else. So I went from this journey, of course, from Dallas, Texas. We were virtually nomads. We had no place to go going from Dallas to Houston. We didn't have space in Houston. We had to come back to Baton Rouge where there was no hotel space. And we met a man by the name of Albert Charles Odell, who was the late, great Albert Charles Odell, someone I have great respect for, who allowed me and my family to stay with him for 2 months till we found a place. My parents paid him actually rent, and he actually took us in, went over his own family. Of course, now I just got to clarify that family actually had to actually didn't show up until later. They found some place to stay, but he took us in like he was his our family. He didn't know us from Adam. He only knew my aunt because my aunt was best friends with his wife. But he and I became very close. Of course, the things you heard in Baton Rouge, I remember Kip Holden making remarks about uh, he didn't want any thugs in his city, just people thinking that people from New Orleans were going to bring this thuggish behavior. Just a bunch of things you heard. They were shooting at the River Center and all of this stuff like that. Just a bunch of bullshit. Just a bunch of bull. I had to listen to, and you heard it even in and saw it even when you would go in a grocery store. Interesting enough, in Baton Rouge, the Albertsons on College has closed down. But 20 years ago, that store was packed. They were about to close then. And sure enough, the population in Baton Rouge doubled because people from New Orleans, especially people that worked there, were staying there. And they were shopping at this grocery store. So they closed. But You best believe New Orleans kept Albertsons going. We kept Albertsons open. New Orleans actually a lot of Albertsons got kept going on for years now. Now they've closed down their store, you see, but we actually kept Albertsons in business. That whole area, a lot of stuff was coming to Baton Rouge that people from New Orleans were starting to buy, shop, especially over at the Mall of Louisiana. We gave them, we gave them a push. What's going on, Beauty Supply? So part of the reason what led me to write the book, I was hearing stuff about, of course, the levees being blown up. I had heard that. There, of course, were people that were denying it, but I got to speak to Dick Gregory, and Dick Gregory was on Kathy Hughes's channel, TV One, and see if I could find that interview. And he said the levees were blown up, and that motivated me. And not only that, but also the stuff that happened during the Katrina, the stuff I was hearing, how people were just speaking negatively about my city, motivated me to write this book. The book actually got to be considered mandatory reading for Southern University, which was big at that time. And I met several people there. I, of course, met, let's see, I have some of my bookmarks from the past. Let's see if they're still up. Some things I quoted from some places. Now, you may not believe this or not, but back in the day, I actually liked I liked Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. Now, Michael Eric Dyson back then was different from Michael Eric Dyson now that's being shielded by the Democrat, who's a shield for the Democrats. He was completely different. I was all into him because I liked how this brother talked, and he was so eloquent in how he spoke, and he talked with so much fashion and passion and grace that it proclamated the black man from nothing to be something. He was like that. And I was like, damn, this brother was smart. He could talk. But then, and he had a book called Come Hell or High Water, where he talked about the aftermath of Katrina and the pain of rebuilding, how white flight destroyed New Orleans before even Katrina happened, which is true. He taught, and I quoted a lot of stuff he stated in my book. I cited him as a source for a lot of things. I cited blogs and so forth as well. But when you talk about 20 years after Katrina, ladies and gentlemen, they talk about has the city rebuilt and recovered. It has not been the same. The New Orleans of 20 years ago certainly is not the same. There were people who were uh, forced to evacuate to other cities. And I'm talking about all the people that actually got pushed to Hawaii. There were people who went to Florida that stayed there. People, of course, a lot of people went to Houston. And I can talk about Houston, how they talked about the invasion of the Katrinians. That was actually uh, if I'm not mistaken, that was actually a Boondocks episode. They talked about it. But Houston, they were doing that too. In Houston. So we were experiencing things everywhere. And the reason why, I guess some people would think, why would they want to take the land? What would be the motive for blowing a levee? Supposedly, if they could do it with the technology, the motive was simple. The motive would be, and even if they didn't, let's say they didn't blow it, but certainly the failures of funding not going towards the levee system would have hurt this as well. But also the fact that this area is worth a lot of land and a lot of money. New Orleans East is worth millions to, and lower ninth ward for that matter, to the shipping industries. So it's worth millions. It's worth millions. And that would have been the goal. That was the goal, was to take this land. They had been trying for years. They wanted this to be green space. That was the motive. So now I look at it 20 years later. Of course, a lot of stuff that was going on. Of course, the just during that time, we saw how people were in the city of Gretna. One of the big stories about that was people not being allowed to leave their homes. The city of Gretna forcing evacuees to turn back around at gunpoint on the Crescent City Connection Bridge. You had the shooting of Henry Glover out in Algiers too, was shot by a sniper rifle. The only person who did time in that case, and these were cops, by the way, was the one who burned the body of Henry Glover because nothing else happened. Of course, the Danziger shooting with Romel Madison's brother, and I knew the Madison family very well, and another young man who was actually killed during that storm. And this was a few days. This was like a couple of days after the Katrina. Of course, there was also supposedly another shooting with some, and this was an Associated Press article with some mercenaries in police. But my understanding, I talked to my dad about that. That was actually in on not the Danziger Bridge, but the Seabrook Bridge. I had heard that. That was Ronald Madison and James Brissett that was killed on September 4th. They were shot on the Danziger Bridge. Henry Glover was another one. Yeah, the clock of humanity just stopped. Just things changed for the worst. No accountability for anything. Yeah, so it was just, you felt the world stop, you felt humanity stop, was no longer there, was absent. You felt that you were alone if you were from New Orleans. You were a stranger in a strange land. That's how it felt. I'm 30 minutes in, no, 25 minutes rather, and we're talking about this. And that's kind of why I wrote my book, Katrina Eyes Have Not Seen, Ears Have Not Heard, because I was exhausted. I was lonely, I was upset, and I felt it was a way to be therapy for me. You can still go get this book on Amazon too, but I'm not here to promote that. I'll talk about that and just wanted to vent and talk. This was just talking about this 20 years later. I wasn't really talking about anything else. Yeah. Y'all notice also there was a naval ship parked outside the Superdome. I still have my parked outside the convention center. You know, I still have all of my references and notes from when I was doing research. I was gathering all types of stuff. Right. The USS Iwo Jima. They had a medical facility ready to take people on staff, and they didn't let those people, they were under orders not to let those people in for almost 10 days. I distinctly remember that. And the main thing with Katrina that people keep forgetting, because they call it this dangerous storm and they try to change this narrative about this, Katrina was not a Cat 5 when it landed. Katrina actually had weakened, and it didn't hit New Orleans, it hit the Gulf, which is why a lot of people suspected something happened with the levees. Katrina actually went to Mississippi. Now, it made landfall, yeah, in Mississippi. Now, Plaquemines Parish, which is a very low lying parish, like Point LaHash and so forth. If you go further down, yeah, that's closer to the Gulf. Point LaHash is is roughly an hour and 15 minutes away from New Orleans. If you're driving from down there to get back, yeah, it's in the country. Literally, I've been to court out in Point LaHash, and that's actually a beautiful courthouse. You all would be shocked that there's nothing out there other than a few convenience stores and a few little businesses, family-owned businesses, and a school. But there's nothing out there uh, down in Point LaHash. It's across from the river, but Mississippi actually got hit harder. Yeah, Katrina actually weakened. There are a couple of documentaries you could watch if you want. I haven't really checked out any, but especially when I was researching this book, I don't know if he's still on here. There was a journalist by the name of Greg Palast who did a documentary called The Big Uneasy. Let me come on the screen. There we go. The Big Uneasy. There was, of course, When the Levees Broke by Spike Lee. I remember doing that. I haven't watched, to be honest, any documentaries as of late. I haven't watched anything. I don't know if I want to watch everything. Well, Katrina was one of those things. This is what I say, and I don't like saying Katrina. I like saying flood, but it really was the government. It really was a failure of government on all levels. Even if you don't think it was something more serious than a levee being blown, the fact is the government failed. The other fact is that this was a land grab. I can't stress that enough. They tried very hard. There was pressure to make this area into green space. And I know because someone told me they had maps of New Orleans East and the Lower Ninth Ward before Katrina, where they had a smaller New Orleans, which is what they wanted. They wanted a smaller, whiter New Orleans. Now, why haven't they gotten that? It was probably because at that time several things was going on. Number one, George Bush is president. We were at war in Iraq. The other thing too was all eyes were on New Orleans at that time. It would have been hard for them to try and actually move everybody out and make this green space. A lot of people were fighting back. We have to give credit where credit is due. Nagin even fought back against it. Nagin fought to a degree, and they had approached Nagin actually sometime in Dallas, Texas, because Nagin, from what I heard, has a house out in Dallas. He had his family. And this Dick Gregory told me all of this. He brought his people up here before the storm even happened. That was something he told me, which I can believe. And I know he also had a meeting sometime. I've heard this too from other people with some business owners who said they wanted a smaller New Orleans. Now, why I call them the Bourbon elite. Why it didn't happen again? People fought, and I think with it being all eyes on people from with New Orleans and so forth, it would have been too obvious. But anyway, make sure, ladies and gentlemen, you go to X. Shout out to my family on X. Make sure we're talking K20. Make sure you subscribe to Random Topics on Rumble, ladies and gentlemen. I got 9, 8, 8, 9, 10, 11 people that are watching. I'm sure we got more people that are checking us out. And you know, a lot of this stuff is all, especially when it comes to algorithm and views, a lot of this stuff is politically motivated, especially on. I learned that on X when I did the tweet about the brother who got shot by that white boy. I got 13,000 views and a lot of likes, and I'm sure there were a lot of conservatives who thought that. There were some who probably also disagreed with what I said, but you know, at that time, I didn't have the information that I needed or that was there. But yeah, I wanted to talk about that, ladies and gentlemen. Y'all smash up the likes. Thank y'all for tuning in on K20. 20 years later, it's hard to believe I had hair back then. I was a young man. I was 19 years old, man. Something else starting that. I was a kid, almost middle. I'm in my middle ages now, or about to approach that. So, uh, but what do y'all think, ladies and gentlemen? Y'all hit that like, share, and subscribe button. This wasn't going to be a long live stream, but I figured I had to come in. I'm not going to do a show on Sunday, but I'm glad you all are here with me. I thank y'all for tuning in. Uh, Make sure you hit that notification bell when we go live. We're talking Katrina 20 years later. I probably would the next time if I had to. I would like to do a live stream with somebody like, if I do any, like a Tariq Nasheed or someone like Queen Amadaya Shakur. Probably reach out to her to talk about this because I know I know King Flex knows a lot about the stuff that's going on. So I'm gonna get up out of here, y'all. This wasn't gonna be a long live stream, but y'all be safe and blessed. This was therapy for me to come on. I didn't really want to do this talking about Katrina over and over again, but I got started, and I know that's really the top news everybody wants to talk about. What's going on, Spirit of Justice? Peace and blessings to you, man. It's good to see you. Yeah, but I'm definitely gonna be taking some time away unless it's like emergencies or stuff. But like I said, y'all can catch me on X and Rumble. ladies and gentlemen. But we got 8 people in here. But yeah, man, if you have a story about Katrina, if you have a story about what happened, why don't you leave a comment too before I get out of here and about your story and what you remember. But I'm gonna wrap this thing up. I got some other stuff I gotta do, family. But you all be safe and be blessed. It's been a pleasure as always. All right. I'll holla. Peace. Whoever you are, wherever you are, hope you are blessed and doing safe. Ladies and gentlemen, greetings, family. Of course, I'm tuning in. You see me without the glasses off today. But if you're looking for some opportunities, particular advertisement opportunities, then look no further at the link at the bottom to my email address. You can hit me up for advertisement opportunities. We are supporting and promoting your businesses here on this channel. You can also, if you would like to donate and subscribe to our Patreon, a link is at the bottom as well. So you have multiple ways in which you can advertise with the platform by emailing me when we go on do our live stream. You also have access to premium content, those that want to see premium content that you will not find here on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, as I am suspended probably by now. You guys can check out the Patreon at link at the bottom. But advertisement opportunities, definitely email me, gavin.grich1@gmail.com for rates. And for the Patreon, it is the same as the YouTube channel. It is channel GBoot2786. All right. I'll holla. Peace.